I'm Joe Kane.
I'm Dan Kane.
I'm Sal Conca.
And I'm Wayne Heckler.
And this is the Imperfect Podcast.
Don't forget to go to hecklerkane.com and sign up to become an Imperfect Podcast Insider.
To the bumper.
This week's guest on the Imperfect Podcast is Fran Strine, who created the music documentary Hired Gun.
Yeah, we got a good chance to talk to him, and it was a lot of fun to see this movie.
Well, as musicians, I think I was the first one to watch it.
Yeah.
And I was just completely enthralled. I had to share it with everybody. I texted all of my friends and said, go watch this damn thing. If you're a musician, you're going to love this movie.
It's on Netflix right now.
Exactly. Trending film on Netflix. It's been doing gangbusters, filmed in 2016. It has a plethora of musical talent from Alice Cooper, Rob Zombie, Steve Vai, David Foster, Ray Parker Jr., the drummer for Billy Joel, the drummer for John Cougar Mellencamp, which I'm ruining the whole thing by not saying their names, which is the
Liberty
point.
DeVitto and Kenny Aronoff.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome. These are guys I'm huge fans of.
Exactly. So Fran was a music photographer for years. He toured with bands like Stained and Nickelback and so many others that it's just impossible to name them all. And this opportunity came up for him. He was looking to do something different with his career coming off the road, and he became a filmmaker. He had done a lot of behind-the-scenes videos for a lot of bands and things like that, which kind of launched him to this place. It was interesting to hear his story on how he got an investor to work with him on the film and how he got the whole thing shot. I mean, this film, a documentary like this, hard work. 2 years of just
2 years of
shooting.
labor. Yeah. You're talking about something that was really a passion project that this was part of his life. He was a part of this community. He was just documenting it the whole time on camera and now has changed over to, film.
And, one of the really great stories was hearing how, he knows George Lucas lives in the same area as him and getting the music produced at Skywalker Ranch.
Exactly. Very cool story.
This documentary is definitely something to suggest to friends,
Yeah.
Especially being musicians. This is something to definitely check out,
Absolutely.
especially if you grew up 80s, 90s.
Yeah, whether you're a filmmaker or a musician or somebody that just loves music, this documentary is one to see. And, listening to what Fran has to say as a filmmaker, you definitely want to hear and listen to the rest of this interview.
Yeah.
So hope you guys enjoy. If you have questions for Fran, leave them in the comments. Don't forget, check out our YouTube channel, and let's hear from Fran. Fran, welcome to the Imperfect Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. You're calling in from sunny California, I believe.
Well, I'm in Northern California. It's a little sunny but chilly tonight.
Oh,
Yeah.
You got a little chill,
So
huh?
not so much sun.
Setting up for Christmas time.
Yeah, you guys might have a white Christmas up there, or what?
Yeah.
Not
I
even-
live about 10 minutes north of the Golden Gate Bridge in a little town called San Rafael, home of Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Lucasfilm and all that stuff.
Nice.
And, I run into George Lucas every once in a while at my Starbucks,
Oh, wow.
but he's the most unapproachable person on the planet Earth.
No.
So it's like nobody makes eye contact with him. Nobody talks to him. They know better, Leave the wizard alone.
What I found most interesting about that is that he gets his own Starbucks.
If anybody wants to stalk him, it's on 4th Street.
They wouldn't dare.
It's pretty funny.
That's hysterical. So you're here to talk about Hired Gun, your latest documentary that's been going pretty crazy on Netflix. I mean, I know it's been a trending movie on there. You shot it in 2016. What was the motivation for you to shoot this film, Hired Gun?
Yeah, so I was a touring videographer, photographer for a bunch of artists for a bunch of years. The likes of Stained, Nickelback, Seether. And
I love Seether.
I had come off the road with Stained and was going to go into kind of like a sabbatical for a year just to kind of enjoy life because I've been on the road for 20 years. And I kept getting a call from these guys at Five Finger Death Punch. Now, I'd heard of the band before. I didn't know much about them. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that they were on the rise. And they kept calling. I kept saying no. And they finally gave me an offer I just could not refuse. I just been a fool to turn it down financially. So I agreed to do it. And it was a world tour. starting in Tokyo and going around the whole planet down through New Zealand, Australia, all of Europe. By the time we got to Australia, and it's no secret, their singers had some substance abuse issues in regards to alcohol. And I was on the verge of turning 50 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm touring with a band called Five Finger Death Punch. I'm 50 years old. I don't want to do this anymore. You know, what am I gonna do with my life, you know? So I decided to make a film, you know, like really dive in and make a quality, compelling movie and take my chances to see where it took me. And by the time we landed, you know, I think the last show was in Glasgow. I hit the ground running like 2 weeks later and didn't stop until the movie was finished.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you also did a couple other things before this. Like what happened before? What was your first kind of breakthrough? Was it the Dolly Live or?
No, actually, no. I was a tour photographer for a bunch of years before I picked up a camera. I have no formal education in filmmaking or photography. It's just hard work. You know, I don't really believe in luck. You know, I worked my ass off to get to this where I'm at right now. So I was on a tour called Tattoo the Earth back in 2000 with a bunch of metal bands as the tour photographer for the tour production. And I happened to just bring a Sony Handy Walkman, or, you know, the camera thing. And I'm like, just going to document my memories. And I started shooting some of the bands live. I'm like, wow, man, moving pictures. This is way cooler than just taking a still image, you know?
Yeah.
So that really intrigued me. And then I was living in Atlanta at the time, and a friend of mine's band called Seven Dust were in the studio with Butch Walker doing a record, and they invited me over just to film some stuff with my little handy cam. And I go in there, and the head of A&R for the record label was in there. Was like, "Oh, you do video?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do video." You know,
Of course.
talking about it. Didn't even own a computer, to be honest with you, at the time. This was in 2003.
That's like what they tell actors. Like if they say, "Can you do?" You go, "Yes, I can."
Anyway, I got hired to do their bonus DVD. This was a thing when records started to slide a little bit, and they would put a accompanying DVD of the making of the album. So I was hired on spot, not knowing what I was doing. And back then, they used to give real money because the label still had great budgets. So I took the half up front money they gave me and went out and bought a killer. I think it was a Sony PDF 150 at the time. I didn't have a computer. I didn't even know how to turn on a computer. So I went and bought the old iMac, I guess, the egg looking one.
Yep.
And Final Cut 2, I think it was back then.
Okay.
And I inserted it all and opened it up, and it just got nauseous immediately. I'm like, what is this? I had no idea what I was doing. And I bought Final Cut for Dummies. And that's how I created that piece. And then from there on, it was a really successful accompaniment piece for that CD. And word of mouth, and then here I am today, you know.
Nice, cool.
So that's how I started out, yeah. So I've done, you know, stuff for lots of music videos. The Dolly Live in London DVD was really big. That was at the time, that was the biggest thing I'd done prior to Hired Gun, and that got me a gold album.
And then you did something called A Battlefield of the Mind. You edited on that? You were the editor? What was that about?
Yeah, I did that as a kind of a passion project. When I was out with Stained, Aaron Lewis and I are both really into the troops and helping veterans or whatnot. And when I moved to the Bay Area, I was shocked at the homeless situation. And I started engaging with some of these guys, and come to find out a lot of them were veterans returning back from Afghanistan, Iraqi wars. And I was just like, man, there's got to be a story here. So I did it. You know, it was a passion project. Didn't really sell it, just kind of gave it to people. And it did make a difference. You know, it helped a lot of people. And I got to see some of the guys in the film that were homeless actually get their stuff together, get treatment, get jobs, and, you know, get into an apartment, which was really, really cool.
That's great. And what was the name of that again? I just want to make sure, because we'll put it in the show notes if it's available for people to check out.
Battlefield of the Mind.
Yeah, Battlefield of the Mind.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I would love for people to check that out. We love to support the veterans as well. So,
Yeah, for sure.
So the motivation for this film? I know you wanted to get off the road essentially,
Yeah.
How do you go from concept to production, and what was the initial concept of this to be able to shoot? I mean, it's specifically about studio musicians, so why was it important to tell their story?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I had seen 20 Feet from Stardom earlier that year.
Mm-hmm.
And that film really touched me. I'm like, wow, this is it was shot well. Storytelling was superb. And I was like, there's another story here like this, and me being in the music field for so many years, I've been in the studio with a bunch of bands, toured with many of them. So I was aware of the hired gun, session guy and live. So I was like, that story really hasn't been told, especially like our contemporaries. And I knew a lot of the people. So I just started reaching out to them. Kind of made a sizzle reel first, and we got an investor in who was a good friend of mine I met through Battlefield of the Mind, who funded just about the entire movie. I'd say 90% of it. Mm-hmm. And, and I know that funding is one of the biggest issues for any filmmaker, especially in the doc space.
Yep.
But I can tell you, man, he came in, he asked no questions. If I needed something, it was always yes. And his name's Todd Polson. I've got to give him a shout out because he really believed in this movie and took the chance. And I thank him every day still.
That's awesome. Do you mind discussing, like, what was the budget for a film like this to make a documentary, and how long did it take to produce?
Well, I can't give the exact number out.
Sure.
I feel like they would kill me.
Sure.
We understand. A lot of people, it's tough sometimes to go, okay, this was how much it was. So,
right. I'll tell you, it was under $1 million, more than $500,000.
Yeah.
So somewhere in between that. And what was the rest of your question? I'm sorry. Just how much did it cost?
No, and then how long did production actually last? Like, how long did it take to put a piece like this together?
Yeah, the interview process was about 2 years, only because we had to wait for some of these artists to free up, because a lot of them are working musicians. So, the toughest one to get was Steve Lukather, because he's all over the place. And he's like, why should I tell you my story for free when I can go make my own Toto documentary? Yeah, hey, I get that. And then all of a sudden he started seeing Jay Grade, Ray Parker, David Foster, Kenny Aronoff, all his friends in the movie. He called me up the day before Christmas Eve and was like, I have to be in your movie now. All my friends are in your fucking movie. But you've only got to tomorrow. So I flew down Christmas Eve morning, interviewed him all day long, flew home, and he was the last guy we interviewed. Yeah.
Who was the first?
The first guy we interviewed was Paul Bushnell. He's only got a little teeny clip in the film, which bums me out because the story is really amazing. But we interviewed 65 people.
Oh, wow.
30 people made the film, yeah. And he's a great guy, probably one of the greatest bass players I've ever heard. I mean, just really super nice guy, super cool story. Unfortunately, there's only so much time in a 98-minute doc that you can really tell a story.
Sure.
With,
how do you go about now? You take a look at all the footage you got. You've gone and interviewed these guys, and how do you now take all this footage and take everything? You've interviewed all these huge guys, right, and you turn around and you go, how do I now assemble a story that's a cohesive story?
Right. Well, that's why I interviewed so many people. It's like, I got to make sure I get the best stories, The first guy I reached out to, ironically enough, was Liberty DeVitto.
Oh, wow.
On the drum tech, Nate was telling me about his story. I'm like, that can't be real. That could not have happened. So Liberty didn't have a manager, an agent, or a PR person. So I hunted him down on Facebook and just sent him a private message. And was like, look, man, I'm doing this film. I've heard your story. Is it true? Can we get on the phone? And he called me like a couple days later, and we spoke for a couple hours. I'm like, okay, And then Rudy Sarzo. Of course, I knew about Rudy. I was a huge metalhead growing up.
Sure.
I know all of them. And he was another guy. As soon as we interviewed him that day, I knew that he would be a huge piece in this film. And it's crazy, man. I get emails, I look online or Twitter or whatnot, and it's 90% of all the comments are about how awesome Rudy Sarzo is as a human being. Mm-hmm. Forget the baseball aspect. Just a great person, and it's true. Just a solid human being. Yeah. So, and all the rest of it was kind of like, okay, well, this story is really cool. So we had these, like the filter store is its own little compartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few of those in there. The Bon Jovi thing with Phil X, because he's such a great player, and his story is really, really cool.
The filter story I'd never heard, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like, as most people know who listen to the show, we're all musicians. So, like, watching something like this was, like, very, like, we know these guys behind the scenes. We know who they are. Like, the general public doesn't necessarily know who Kenny Aronoff is, and doesn't know necessarily who Liberty DeVitto, I would say, people know.
If you live on Long Island.
If you live on Long Island. Guys, we're from Long Island. You know, we have that Billy Joel connection. But you know, the general public doesn't necessarily know these guys unless you're musicians. So looking at this, it really is an amazing feat to be able to get in touch with all these guys, because they're working. Like you said this before, they're working.
Yep.
And
and 2 years, 2 years doing interviews. How long did the actual editing take?
Well, that's the funny story.
Now, Gavin Fisher, right? I'm sorry.
Those took forever, man. We had terabytes and terabytes of, you know, hundreds of hours of footage. So once we narrowed down who the main stories we're going to focus on, we just kind of honed in. And initially, our first editor was Gavin Fisher, who probably edited 90% of the film that you see today. And you know, I'd sit with him down to see. He was in San Diego at the time, so I'd fly down to San Diego, spend a couple of weeks with him, and we'd flesh out some of these scenes. And you know, going in, we knew that Liberty would be a great guy. So there's a really tense scene in the film where he's playing the drums, talking about getting divorced and everything else. He kicks his drums over. So we knew we were going to build a piece on that. So I asked him while we were in the studio, I was like, start off slow and then build it up a little bit and get pissed off. You're the last guy playing, so if you want to destroy the drum kit, go for it. And he did. You know, he's an animal. So, you know, Gavin knew my vision for that scene and just nailed it, you know. And same thing with the Rudy Sarzo, Randy Rhoads, you know, plane accident scene. That was,
that was
you know,
strong.
wanted to treat that with a lot of respect. And, you know, Rudy trusted me with that scene. And it was super heavy. It was very difficult for him to go there and talk about that again. And I thank him today for that, because that was, you know, he wears that on his sleeve. You can see it in the footage. That was all real. You know, it was one take. We were all crying, you know, the whole crew.
Sure.
You know, Gavin did a great job, and then he had to step away for some personal reasons, and we had to keep going, you know. So I reached out to a guy named Tim Calandrello, and he came in and kind of pieced that puzzle together at the last second and finished it out. And I edited a couple of scenes. I don't call myself an editor. Like at the Pink segment, the Just What the Doctor Orders segment, and one more, the Steely Dan section.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Which there's a cool story if you want me to tell it about that song. And this goes back to some of the filmmakers wanting to know questions about licensing music.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a big question that I know Joe had actually lined up. We wanted to know how playing music throughout this documentary, how did licensing go? And so, yeah, you can run with that.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of finding Julie Glaze Houlihan, who was our music clearance person and our supervisor and everybody else. She was so instrumental in getting this film done and all the music. And we did a favored nation deal with everybody that we all agreed on a fee, and they, you know, luckily for us, everybody agreed to it. But if the filmmakers out there don't know, there's two sides to licensing a song. There's the publishing side that goes to the songwriters, and there's the master recording that belongs to the record label, right? And we had Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, you know, he was still alive at the time, cleared the publishing for us. They gave us permission to use the song. However, the record label denied us, the master. So we were like, what are we going to do? Well, Jay Graydon, if anybody knows, is famous for writing that guitar solo and playing it on the record. So I just took a shot, man. I'm good friends with Jay Graydon now, and I was comfortable enough to call him. You're like, you still have your studio and all this other stuff. I was like, what do you feel about doing a re-record of the Peg song and recreating that solo? Because here's the situation. He's like, you got any bread? I was like, yeah, man, we got a little bit of money to throw your way. So he's like, I'm in. Give me a week.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So, man, he came back, and what you hear in Hired Gun is not Steely Dan. It's him. He nailed it.
That's cool. That's cool.
Not only that, but he used the same 1965 Gibson ES3 that he played on Steely Dan. and the Fender Twin Reverb. 40 years old. I haven't turned the amp on in 25 years.
Wow.
See, now you're talking my scene.
the
I'm a
gearhead.
gearhead. And
That's
I'm
a
like
great
dying
story.
here. I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. And then, I went down and interviewed him for some B-roll stuff, talking about him doing the re-recording. He broke out the guitar. It's like, you want to hold it, man? I'm like, I don't want this thing to disintegrate in my hand. Like this belongs in a museum,
Wow.
Such a cool guitar. So yeah, but if you got any more questions about the music, I'm happy to talk about any of that stuff. But that's
How do you set up that whole like jam session that we saw
oh,
going
man.
through, and you have all these guys that just come in and play? You had Liberty and Kenny Arnoff playing drums in the same
two
room.
monster drummers banging.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, before you say that, I do want to say the editor did a great job of tying that together, right? Because Rob Zombie said, well, why don't somebody put that type of band together? And then there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So how did you assemble that band is the question.
I'd already interviewed everybody that you saw in those jams, right? And lucky for me, that jam happened right around NAMM, so everybody was at NAMM that weekend.
Nice.
So I'm like, hey guys, I've got this idea of going. We did that at East West Studios in Hollywood. It's a massive recording studio where so many great classic records were made.
Nice.
And I'm like, would you guys be interested? I got 19 of the people. So there's stuff in the can that nobody's ever seen. I mean, we've got like Corky Hale and Mark Shulman from Pink's band does this crazy solo, and so many other things. I just wish that we could have licensed, but we couldn't. Phil Chen, doing Freeway Jam. So I just called them all out. I'm like, hey man, I've got this open weekend. Are you guys down to do this? Just come jam. And we had 1 day of rehearsals. And then 3 days at East West, and they just killed it, man. They just and no egos. Everybody was so cool. It was a nightmare to put together for me because I had to, produce the entire film. So I had to go. There's 23 people behind the camera you didn't even see. Like crew and art and catering and everything else. And it was a nightmare, but so worth it. When I was on set watching it go down, it was just chills. I can't believe Brad Gillis.
Yeah.
Ripping a solo over here with Kenny Arnoff on drums, Paul Bush on bass, or Rudy on bass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Nita Strauss and Phil X and all these Michael Herring, just amazing musicians,
And where did this? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
I was going to say, and the guy that produced the track itself is Johnny Kay, who is a Grammy-nominated producer of the year. He did all the Disturbed records, Stained. Three Doors Down. He owed me a favor because I got him a recent gig with Megadeth.
Yeah, nice.
Those guys, yeah, and I called out my favor to him. I'm like, hey man, I don't have any money, but remember I got you 2 Megadeth records. That's my promise. I was like, I'll fly in because he lives in Chicago and put you up in a hotel, but I don't have any money. So he came in and was so cool, man. Just killed it under so much stress.
Right.
Manage all those musicians and change. It's like, wow, I don't know how you did it. But,
Yeah, who actually wrote those songs? Who was in charge? Like, where did the song ideas come from for that?
Michael Fish Herring kind of did the blues jam thing at the end.
Sure.
And, he plays guitar for everybody now. He was in Prince's band for a while, Christina Aguilera. Just a fantastic musician, a great person. And but that opening jam, I think it was just Phil X came up with that riff. Mm-hmm. At the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And kind of jumped in and just freestyle. There was no rehearsal of that at all. And then the end jam, they just ran through for like 2 or 3 minutes. Like, okay, let's just do it. Really cool.
Sure.
Yeah.
So now, after you've produced and edited, and you got this great documentary sitting here in front of you, what's the distribution plan? We know it ends up on Netflix. Was that your first choice? Is that where the only place you wanted to put it? What was the plan when you were making it, and did you stick to that plan, or was Netflix a diversion?
No, not at all. So for me, I wanted this movie to stand out and have legs. We didn't have a distributor at all going in. Even the South by Southwest is where world premiered the film. And we had been talking to Vision Films for a while, as well as a couple of other sales agents, and we decided to go with Vision. And they got us they got us a deal with Fathom Events for a one-night screening in 320 theaters across the country.
Nice.
And we went that round. It did really well. And right after that, I think August 1st, we did all of our VOD. And I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of platforms that we went to, and did really well. And then Sony came in as our arm of our physical distribution worldwide. I think the film's in 26 different languages.
Awesome.
And then, and we got the Netflix deal early on. We did a screening in New York at the Soho House and had all, the dreaded Weinstein Company was there. And we got an offer like the next day from Netflix to pick it up.
Nice.
And December 1st it went on, and it just exploded on there, which was, I wish that the film could have done the same thing outside of Netflix. Because if anybody knows, Netflix is just a licensing deal. They pay you a flat fee.
Yeah.
No residuals for okay, 400,000 people watch your movie. Here's a dime for every person that watched it. It's
it's
a good deal, but
Well, some people do steer away from Netflix because of that. However, you have become a success on Netflix.
Look, I feel so lucky. I really do. I mean, it was due to a lot of hard work by myself and our crew, and of course the cast that were so cool to share their stories with us. That made it a compelling film. And once the people actually get to see it, that aren't going to go spend the $12.99 at Amazon or download it or whatnot, it's great. So happy.
It's funny how, you do things for art that sometimes aren't for the money, because you see, it's like your story, Hired Gun, sometimes doesn't lead that direction, but they live their whole lives doing it. And here you are doing this great film about that. And it's almost like the same thing. Like, hopefully you get a lot more attention and you keep going. But, sometimes it's just about our art also. And you did a great job, I want to say that.
Yeah, the film has done exactly what I wanted to do, which was kind of elevate my career to the next stepping stone.
Sure.
So a ton of work.
You had a little story that we talked about before we went live on air here, and I would love for you to share it because you didn't really delve into it too much. But it's about the mixing process that you went through to get the sound correct in this obviously sound heavy film.
A music documentary needs to have good sound, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, any film needs. All the filmmakers know it's more important to have better audio than it is picture. I mean, if you have nothing, you don't have any sound.
Right.
So I knew the film would look good. We went as good as we could without using film, which my next project will be shot on film thanks to Kodak. We can get into that as well.
Would love to.
But the mix was I was like, okay, I got to find a place to mix this thing. So I'm calling all these places in Los Angeles. I live in Northern California, and the thought of just going to LA and spending 2 weeks was not appealing to me. I was like, you know what? I know Skywalker Ranch is up 2 miles up the road. I might as well just see what I know they're going to say no. I mean, it's, huge. So I sent a vague email to this thing, info@skywalkerranch.com. There's no really formal thing. That's it. They're very locked down.
That's kind of generic for such a big company.
Yeah.
That's all they have, because I think they want it that way.
Sure.
So I sent them the sizzle reel, a little synopsis. I'm like, hey, I'm a local guy living here in Marin County. A lot of the film, post was done here. Shot some of it here. There's a bunch of musicians here that were in the film. And I get an email the next day. It's like, we have to mix this film.
Wow.
Can we get you a bid together? I'm like, what? Usually I get the first question is, what is your budget?
Right.
How can we submit a bid? So they submitted the bid to me, man. I got to tell you, it was half of what anything in LA would have charged.
Wow.
And I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, would you like to come up and do a walkthrough and meet your mixer and all this stuff? I'm like, duh, you know what I mean? So
You can't tell Lucasfilm that they bid half of what anybody else would have.
It was insane, man. In their boutique place, you can't just go in there with a boatload of money and get they have to select you to.
Yeah.
Sure, but it shows they believed in the project. That's what.
Yeah. So I go there, and our mixer was Scott Lewis. Great mixer. He's won a couple Emmys. He does House of Cards. He just did the new David Fincher Mindhunter thing, and fell in love with the project, and killed it. Had such a good time. And the question, everybody's like, well, what is Skywalker Ranch like? And my question's always like, whatever you think it is, that's what it is. I can't even put it into words, you know? And it's like you're driving there, you're seeing like turkeys and chickens and these Wagyu cows and like vineyards on the hill, bee farms. So anything you eat on property is slaughtered or grown there, including like the apple jam. You know, they have an apple orchard.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. But yeah, so they killed it. And we got to screen it in the Stag Theater. It's 70,000 watts of power. Each seat has a thumper under it. And I'll never hear my movie sound this good again as long as I live, you know. And it's true that the place is phenomenal. Yeah, really neat.
Wow, that's amazing.
Another thing I'd like to give a shout out to also is the score of the film. The stuff that you don't recognize,
sure.
Like some of the emotionally charged scenes. I had been using library music, you know, for all the temp stuff, and Julie Houlihan's like, you know, this is going to cost a fortune just for even the library music. You'll come out even or maybe even ahead if you hire a composer to compose an original score. I had no idea. I was like, that's a thing? She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, here's a bunch of agents. Give them a call. Have them give you some of their client stuff. I'm like, okay. So I'm getting stuff and I'm listening to it. And this one lady sent me this stuff from the Crystal Method. It was an EDM band in the early 2000s.
Oh, I know them, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, this is interesting. You know, would it work in a documentary though? And held a meeting with Scott Kirkland, who was the head of the Crystal Method, and come to find out, he was a huge metalhead. Man, I'm telling you right now, Quiet Riot was my favorite band on the planet Earth. Please let me score the Randy Rudy scene. Yeah. Just let me show you I can do it. I was like, okay, no problem. I sent it to him. He sent it back the next morning. I was like, you're hired. You know,
that's awesome.
It had 3 weeks, I think, to do the whole thing before he had to go to mix. And they did such a great job. There's so much pressure too, you know, again. And I'd work with them again in a heartbeat. And the soundtrack for the score is on iTunes rather. So you can actually buy it. It's so good.
Oh, okay. We'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well.
It's nice when people you work with are passionate about the project as well. It shows through, yes.
Yeah, I mean, these guys do, they do the score for the show. House, Bones, tons, Fast and Furious 7.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, you think about a band like Crystal Method, who was around. I mean, I listened to them in college. You know, and it's like, well, what the hell ever happened to them, right? They're doing movie scores now and all this other stuff.
Movie scores and they were touring, you know?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Another little tidbit, if anybody watches the film or has seen it and you watch the Jason Newsted scene where Cliff Burton passes away and you hear the bass playing, real somber bass, that is, oh God, I'm going to forget his name now, the bass player for Tool. Justin Chancellor.
Oh shit!
Yeah, so we attempted that scene with Orion from Master of Puppets. I sent it over, and Scott doesn't play bass. You know, he plays the keys and scratches stuff, I guess. He's like, "Did you really have to tempt it with this? How do I top this?" So his best friend is Justin Chancellor. So he called him over the weekend and was like, "Would you take a stab at this and see what you can do?" You know. And I guess they went back and forth over the weekend. They sent it to me. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought you said you couldn't play bass. This is amazing. Justin Chancellor from Tool. I'm like, good grief.
Yeah.
And under some of the stuff, you have to really listen to it for the Randy Rudy scene is my good buddy Mike Newshock from the band Stained. Wrote some guitar parts for that thing as well. And very, very glad he did that. It came out really great. He's a good guy.
Cool. Well, I'm sure this film has been already opening up many doors for you. So what's on the horizon? Are you working on something now? Is there something coming down the pike that you're working on?
Yeah, I shot I want to say a pilot called Legacy. And there's this great rock photographer named Ash Newell. That I know that I'm a huge fan of. He's a great photographer. And he approached me and was wanting to do a program based on capturing the essence of some of these huge legacy artists. and a photograph while telling their story. I thought it was a great concept, so we collaborated on it together, and we shot it. We're shopping it now, and we think we have a home for it. There's a couple other stuff I can't really talk about right now because it's getting finalized and paperwork's being done. But I would say there's no less than like 4 projects right now that I'm kind of, trying to pick which one I really want to do and which would be good for my career, And I tell you, one of them who revolves around is Ray Parker Jr.
Oh wow, that would be that's awesome.
Well, he was also in the documentary too, so I guess you developed a relationship with him.
He's gone all around the world with me. Look, this guy doesn't need to do anything for me. He's so well off financially.
Right.
It's staggering, okay? Not just a little bit of money. We're talking astronomical hundreds of dollars. And I'm like, why are you doing this, man? He goes, dude, I love traveling. I love your movie. I love that you put me in it, and I appreciate it, and I see how hard you're working on it. And he gave me some really good advice. He's like a mentor almost. I love the guy to death. He's so cool. And he literally we went to Australia. We've gone to Portland. We've gone to Chicago, everywhere. I don't know. We've probably spent together 20 times so far.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and getting to know the guy. Of course, we interviewed him for Hire Again, but there's stuff he left out. He just got home from Japan the night before when we did the interview with him, but I don't know if anybody remembers or is familiar with the civil unrest in Detroit during 1967 with the riots. Mm-hmm. Well, he was 20 years old at the time, and he lived on that street where the riots were happening.
Wow.
For him, just getting from school to home was a big thing, right?
Yeah, I love when he said, does it bother you when someone says, oh, who are you going to call? Like when you hear the same thing over there. He said, why would that bother me? He made an impact on society worldwide. They know that, the Ghostbusters song.
That song to me is bigger than the movie ever was, to be honest with you. Yeah, and he gets attacked everywhere he goes. Like, oh, man. He loves it. He doesn't take it for granted. He genuinely loves the attention he gets from it. But what people fail to realize is he had a whole career as a side guy.
Right.
Way before he was even an artist on his own. I mean, he's played with Marvin on the Marvin Gaye records. He played on Superstitious with Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, wow.
Barry White records. Diana Ross. I mean, massive. Aretha Franklin.
Wow.
Patti LaBelle. I mean, he wrote songs too for people like Shaka Khan, Edition. Tons of artists he wrote for.
Well, if Ray's available for interview, we'd love to talk with him.
Yeah, that's true.
Seconds, man. He loves doing this stuff. I can definitely arrange that for you.
Oh my God, that would be so cool. But yeah.
Yeah. So for me, there's really a compelling story there about his journey that I think needs to be told, and that's one thing I definitely would love to work on.
Nice.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, Fran, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. This was great. I mean, as musicians, like I said, we really wanted to talk to you and hear what your journey was like and what it was like for you to work with all these guys. So we really appreciate you coming on.
As a fellow filmmaker and musicians, rock on.
Yeah, look, if I can do it, anybody can. It just came from a small idea to a reality. The one thing I will tell all the filmmakers and anybody else out there, and musicians as well, is what David Foster told me as a little piece of advice. He's like, man, he goes, yeah, I'm good. He goes, but I surround myself with people better than me, and it makes me look better in the end. Sure. So don't ever be afraid to and I surround myself, look, my DP and editors and everybody else blow me away, and I welcome it, because they killed it,
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Well,
and if anybody in the LA area is looking for sound guy, Thomas Corcoran is your dude. He got the biggest compliment at Skywalker Ranch. Our mixer was like, this is the best sounding, consistent audio of a documentary I've ever worked on in my career.
Wow.
And that's a testament to his knowledge and work skills. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the sound was definitely solid and it was noticeable because, I play everything through my surround sound at home when I watched it through Netflix. And so, I mean, I heard everything. It was great.
Nice. Well, thanks again for having me on.
Thank you.
If you want to see the behind-the-scenes footage, Amazon.com. You can buy the DVD or Blu-ray there. There's like an hour worth of bonus material on there. It's jaw-dropping. So, yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Do you
we'll
have
put that
any
up.
Facebook, anything like that you'd like to share with our audience? Any other contact?
Yeah, I think all our handles are just Hired Gun Film.
Yep.
For Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the like. Yeah.
Okay.
Go check it. You'll like it. And, share it with all your friends and family. You know, great film.
Fran, thank you very much for spending your night with us.